working as a cleaner in a mansion. The woman froze when she realized the millionaire's husband was her own husband, who had disappeared 5 years ago. She approached, and Lily took a deep breath as she stood outside the massive iron gates of the Westwood mansion. Her heart raced, and her palms were sweaty despite the chilly morning air. This wasn't her first cleaning job, but something about this place, its grandeur and the layers of history woven into its architecture, made her feel small. For a moment, she wondered if she belonged here. But then the thought of her daughter, Mia, filled her with determination. This job would provide the stability they needed. The gates slowly creaked open, and Lily walked up the long driveway, each step echoing on the cobblestone path. The mansion loomed before her, a grand display of wealth and opulence, with tall windows and intricate stonework that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Her breath caught as she finally reached the front entrance, where a stern-faced butler nodded curtly, leading her inside without a word. Once through the doors, Lily was enveloped by the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. The entryway was massive, with crystal chandeliers hanging above and marble floors gleaming beneath her feet. She took in her surroundings, feeling almost like a tourist in a palace, before the butler's voice pulled her back to reality. "Your uniform and cleaning supplies are in the service area down the hall," he said, not bothering to hide the boredom in his voice. "Mrs. Westwood expects all the rooms spotless by this evening. You'll start with the main rooms on the first floor." Lily nodded, clutching her purse tightly as she followed his directions. She quickly changed into her uniform and began her work, trying to focus on the tasks ahead. The house was filled with priceless antiques, grand paintings, and statues that felt out of place in her world. She moved from room to room, dusting and scrubbing, trying to silence the thoughts of her past that occasionally surfaced. It had been 5 years since Tom had disappeared from her life without a trace, leaving her to raise Mia alone. She'd moved on, or so she thought, as she entered the grand living room. She paused, letting herself admire the lavish furniture and the massive fireplace that dominated the room. That's when she heard footsteps approaching. Her heart thudded as she quickly lowered her gaze, focusing on her cleaning cloth, not wanting to appear out of place. The footsteps stopped nearby, and when Lily finally looked up, her entire world seemed to tilt. There, standing just a few feet away, was Tom. His hair was a little shorter and there were lines on his face she didn't remember. But it was him, the man she had once loved, the man she had thought she'd lost forever. Her mind raced, and she couldn't process what she was seeing. "Good morning," he said with a polite, distant smile that sent chills down her spine. His voice was familiar, but there was no hint of recognition in his eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. Good morning, sir," she finally managed, feeling her cheeks flush. She could barely keep herself steady, her fingers clenching the cleaning cloth tightly. Her heart ached as she searched his face for any sign of the Tom she had known. But there was nothing, only polite indifference, as if she were just another stranger in his world. He nodded and walked past her, his attention focused on something else entirely, as though she didn't exist. Lily felt a rush of emotions: pain, confusion, and a sliver of anger. She watched him disappear down the hallway, her mind racing. How could he not remember her? The man she'd loved, the father of her child, was standing just a few feet away, yet he looked at her as if she were invisible. "Lily, focus," she muttered to herself, struggling to push down the overwhelming feelings. She resumed her cleaning, her hands shaking slightly as she wiped down the tables and dusted the shelves. The day dragged on painfully, each encounter with Tom haunting her thoughts. She had so many questions, but how could she ask them? Would he even believe her? Just as she was finishing her shift, Mrs. Vivian Westwood appeared, elegant and poised, her sharp eyes quickly assessing Lily. Vivian was beautiful, with an air of confidence that only wealth and power could provide. Her gaze lingered a bit too long on Lily, her expression unreadable, almost calculating. "You're the new housekeeper." Vivian's voice was smooth, but there was a subtle edge to it. "Yes, ma'am," Lily replied, keeping her tone polite and controlled. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. "I expect absolute discretion. The staff here knows better than to pry or gossip about personal matters," she said, her gaze hardening. "And remember, my husband has been through a lot. I don't want anyone upsetting him." Lily swallowed, nodding quickly. Of course. Ma'am? Vivian's lips curved into a tight smile before she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The warning hung in the air, and Lily felt a chill run down her spine. It was clear that Vivian was fiercely protective of her life and her husband, a man who now had no memory of the past they once shared. As Lily left the mansion that evening, the weight of the day pressed down on her. She felt lost, torn between the memories of the love she once had and the man who now seemed like a stranger. The ache in her chest grew with each step she took away from the house, away from Tom. But as she looked back one last time, she knew this wasn't over. She needed answers, and no matter how much it hurt, she wasn't going to leave until she found out the truth about what had happened to the man she had once loved. Lily returned to the mansion the next morning, her mind still swirling from the shock of seeing Tom. Sleep had evaded her, and she spent the night replaying the encounter over and over, trying to make sense of it. How could the man she loved, the father of her daughter, now be married to someone else and have no recollection of their life together? Each time she remembered his blank expression, a pang of sadness struck her. As she stepped into the grand foyer, she was greeted by the same overwhelming grandeur. But today, it felt different. She wasn't just here to work. She was here to uncover the truth. Her heart pounded as she moved through the house, keeping an ear out for any sound that might indicate Tom was nearby. Part of her wanted to see him again, to search for any hint of the man he once was. Another part, however, was terrified of facing him, afraid of the emptiness in his eyes. She was assigned to clean the study that morning, a large, wood-paneled room lined with leather-bound books and family portraits. As she carefully dusted the shelves, her attention was drawn to a particular portrait hanging near the fireplace. In it, Tom stood beside Vivian, his arm around her shoulders, both smiling as if they had everything in the world. The sight of them together felt like a punch to the gut, and she quickly averted her gaze, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "Lily," a voice called softly from behind her. She turned, heart pounding, to see one of the other staff members, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Yes," Lily responded, hoping the woman couldn't see the turmoil in her face. "I just wanted to introduce myself," the woman said warmly. "I'm Maria, the cook. I noticed you seemed a little out of sorts yesterday. First days can be overwhelming." Lily forced a smile, grateful for the kindness. "Thank you, Maria. It's just, well, this place is so big. I've never worked anywhere like it." Maria chuckled, nodding in understanding. "You get used to it, but there's something you should know if you're working here. We all respect Mr. Grant's privacy. He's been through a lot." Lily's interest piqued, and she tried to keep her voice casual. "What do you mean?" Maria hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. "It's no secret among the staff, but Mr. Grant was in a terrible accident a few years ago. He survived, but it left him with no memory of his past. He doesn't remember anything before that. No family, no friends, nothing. Mrs. Westwood was there for him during his recovery, and they eventually married." Lily's breath caught. No memory. That explained the empty look in his eyes, the lack of recognition. A mixture of relief and sadness flooded through her. Tom hadn't left her and their daughter on purpose. He hadn't abandoned them. He simply didn't remember. "Did the doctor say if he'll ever recover his memory?" Lily asked, trying to sound casual. Maria shrugged, her expression softening. "They said it's unlikely, though sometimes he remembers little things. A place, a face. But it never lasts, Mrs. Westwood keeps a close eye on him, though. She's very protective, doesn't like him getting too close to strangers, especially anyone from outside their circle." Lily's mind reeled with the new information. Tom's marriage to Vivian hadn't been a betrayal. It was born out of necessity, out of the emptiness that his lost memories had left behind. For a moment, a glimmer of hope sparked within her. Maybe, just maybe, she could help him remember. The rest of the day passed in a blur as Lily carried on with her tasks, her mind constantly drawn back to Tom and his amnesia. The idea of him being so close, yet so far away from their shared history, tore at her. She spent the day avoiding Vivian, who seemed to be watching her more closely, as if sensing some hidden connection between her and Tom every time their paths crossed. Vivian's gaze lingered a bit too long, her smile too sharp. It was clear she was keeping tabs on Lily. Later that afternoon, as she was cleaning the library, Lily's heart leapt as she heard familiar footsteps entering the room. She looked up, catching sight of Tom as he walked in, his eyes scanning the shelves with a distant, thoughtful expression. She felt a surge of courage and took a deep breath, deciding to speak to him, even if it was only for a moment. "Mr. Grant," she called softly, keeping her voice steady. He turned, looking at her with mild curiosity. "Yes." She struggled to find the right words. I heard about your accident. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. It must be difficult, not remembering things." Tom's face softened slightly, and he nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Yes, it is. Some days, it's like I'm looking through fog, trying to grasp at shadows. Nothing feels solid." Lily felt a flicker of hope. "Have you ever remembered anything specific, like a person or a place?" He paused, seeming to consider her question carefully. "Sometimes, I get flashes, faces I can't place, names that don't mean anything to me, but they fade almost as quickly as they come." He looked at her with a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "Do you believe in second chances?" The question caught Lily off guard, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I do." Tom seemed to study her, a strange intensity in his gaze, as if trying to place her in some forgotten memory. The moment stretched between them, filled with an unspoken connection, until the sound of approaching footsteps broke the spell. Vivian's voice cut through the air, smooth and possessive. "There you are, darling. I was looking for you." She appeared in the doorway, her eyes flickering between Lily and Tom with a tight, guarded smile. "You must have a lot of work to do," she said to Lily, her tone a polite dismissal. Lily forced herself to nod, breaking eye contact with Tom and focusing on her cleaning supplies. She could feel Vivian's gaze burning into her back as she left the room, her heart heavy yet filled with a strange determination. As she walked down the hallway, Lily's mind was racing. She had no doubt that Vivian suspected something, but she wasn't about to let her guard down. Tom deserved to know the truth, and if there was any chance, no matter how small, that she could help him remember, she would take it. Lily took a deep breath, clinging to that fragile hope. The following morning, Lily arrived at the mansion feeling the weight of yesterday's revelations pressing down on her. She knew the truth about Tom's memory loss, and though the discovery had stirred a flicker of hope, it was clouded by a sense of dread. Vivian had already shown her possessiveness and wariness, and Lily sensed that the woman's suspicions were only growing. As she prepared her cleaning supplies in the service area, Lily caught sight of Vivian in a reflection, walking briskly down the hallway with her usual grace. Vivian seemed oblivious to her presence, but Lily felt a prickling sense of being watched. She took a steadying breath, trying to focus on her work, but Vivian's figure lingered at the edge of her vision, her piercing eyes like a hawk ready to swoop down at the first sign of weakness. Lily's first task was to clean the grand dining room, a sprawling space adorned with crystal chandeliers, a massive mahogany table, and gold-framed mirrors that reflected the opulence of the mansion. She moved methodically, polishing each surface, her mind whirling as she replayed her conversation with Tom in the library. The connection she had felt, the way he had looked at her, had been unmistakable. Even without his memories, there was something between them, something that neither time nor amnesia could erase. As she worked, Vivian entered the dining room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Lily kept her head down, focusing on the cloth in her hands, but she could feel Vivian's gaze boring into her. "Lily," Vivian said, her tone smooth yet laced with an undercurrent of suspicion. Lily straightened, carefully masking her expression. "Yes, ma'am." Vivian took a step closer, her eyes narrowed slightly, assessing. "You've been here only a few days, but I notice you've taken quite an interest in my husband." The accusation, veiled as it was, sent a jolt through Lily. She forced herself to remain calm, her voice steady. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. I assure you, I have no interest beyond that." Vivian's lips curled into a tight, humorless smile. "Good," she replied, her gaze unyielding. "I wouldn't want anyone upsetting him, especially not the staff." Lily nodded, feeling the weight of the warning in Vivian's words. She was fully aware that Vivian saw her as a potential threat, even if she didn't understand why. The woman's eyes flickered with a coldness that sent a chill down Lily's spine, but she maintained her composure, unwilling to show even a hint of vulnerability. "Tom's been through so much," Vivian continued, her voice softening just enough to convey a false sense of sympathy. "After his accident, it took a long time for him to feel normal again. He's fragile, you understand?" "Yes, of course, ma'am," Lily replied. Her heart pounding, every instinct told her to end the conversation, to walk away before she revealed anything. But Vivian's gaze held her captive, as if she were searching for something just beneath the surface. Vivian's expression shifted, her eyes darkening as she leaned in slightly. "If I ever find that someone is here with hidden intentions, trying to dredge up things that should remain buried, well, let's just say I wouldn't tolerate it." The message was clear, and Lily forced herself to nod, her voice even. "Understood, ma'am." Vivian straightened, casting one last lingering look at Lily before leaving the room. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she resumed her work, her mind racing. Vivian's words had been carefully chosen, but the intent was unmistakable. The woman knew there was something more going on, even if she couldn't quite place it yet. For the rest of the day, Lily remained on edge, aware of Vivian's presence in the periphery of every room she entered. Each time she caught a glimpse of Vivian, the woman's gaze seemed sharper, more calculating, as if she were trying to peel back layers and expose whatever secrets Lily might be hiding. That evening, as Lily gathered her things to leave, she felt a surge of determination. Vivian's warnings had unsettled her, but they had also strengthened her resolve. She couldn't let fear or intimidation stop her. Tom deserved to know the truth about their past, and about the daughter he had unknowingly left behind. She wouldn't let Vivian's threats scare her into silence. Just as she reached the front hall, preparing to step outside, she heard Tom's voice behind her. "Lily," he called, his tone hesitant but warm. She turned, her heart leaping as she met his gaze. There was something softer in his eyes, a flicker of recognition perhaps, or a memory on the verge of breaking through. He took a step closer, glancing around as if ensuring they were alone. "I was hoping I'd see you before you left," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I feel like there's something about you, something familiar. It's strange, but I can't shake it." Lily's breath caught. She wanted to reach out, to tell him everything, but she knew the risk. If Vivian discovered that they were speaking, her job, and any chance of reconnecting with Tom, would be in jeopardy. "Mr. Grant, she began, her voice thick with emotion, but she hesitated, searching for the right words. Sometimes the past finds us, even when we least expect it. Tom's brow furrowed, and for a moment, his gaze sharpened as if he were about to grasp something just out of reach. But the look faded, replaced by confusion. "What does that mean?" he asked, a hint of desperation in his tone. Before Lily could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hall. They both turned to see Vivian, her face a mask of perfect calm, though her eyes glinted with suspicion as she looked between them. "Is everything all right?" Vivian's voice was gentle, but the steel behind it was unmistakable. Lily quickly stepped back, bowing her head. "Yes, ma'am, I was just leaving." She avoided Tom's gaze, feeling his lingering presence as she brushed past him, heart pounding. She could feel Vivian's stare following her as she made her way out. Every step a reminder of the precarious line she was walking. As Lily exited the mansion, the evening air cool against her flushed cheeks, she felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Tom was beginning to sense a connection, and she was desperate to help him remember, but Vivian's growing suspicion threatened to ruin everything. One wrong move, one misstep, and Vivian would make sure she never set foot in that mansion again. Yet Lily couldn't give up. She had come too far, and Tom's closeness stirred memories of the love they had once shared, a love that felt as if it had survived, despite the years and distance. She knew she couldn't walk away now, not when the truth was within reach. As she walked home under the dim streetlights, her mind was filled with thoughts of Tom, his tentative smile, the look in his eyes that hinted at something more. She would return tomorrow, even if Vivian's shadow loomed over her. The next morning, Lily entered the mansion with a mixture of apprehension and determination. She was acutely aware of Vivian's watchful eyes, but she knew that somewhere beneath the haze of amnesia, Tom was beginning to remember the way he had looked at her the night before, the recognition flickering behind his eyes. It was more than she had dared to hope for. It kept her going, pushing her forward despite the risks. As she moved from room to room, she went about her tasks with quiet efficiency. Though her mind was far from focused on dusting or polishing, she wanted to find a moment alone with Tom, even if it was brief. She longed to see if that recognition would surface again, if perhaps he would remember something, anything that could bring him back to her. Late that morning, as she was arranging flowers in one of the sitting rooms, she heard footsteps approaching. Her heart leaped when she saw Tom entering, his gaze distant, but with an unmistakable curiosity that lingered as he took in the room. And then her. She set down the vase, forcing herself to remain calm as he slowly walked over. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice soft yet warm. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," Lily replied, unable to keep a small smile from touching her lips. She noted how his gaze lingered, almost as if he were seeing her in a different light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick but not uncomfortable. It was as if they were standing on the edge of something important, something that didn't need words. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "Have we met before?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly. There was a vulnerability in his tone, a yearning for clarity. "I mean, before you started working here." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to tell him everything, to lay the truth bare, but she knew the risk. Vivian was never far, and if she sensed that Lily was dredging up Tom's past, she'd find a way to keep them apart. She chose her words carefully. Sometimes, people who share a connection find their way back to each other, even when they're not expecting it. Tom looked at her, a faint smile pulling at the corners of his lips. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like there's something I should remember. Something important." His gaze softened, almost as if he were seeing her as someone familiar, someone he knew, but the look quickly faded, replaced by confusion and frustration. "It's like chasing shadows." Lily swallowed, her throat tight. Memories have a way of resurfacing when you least expect them. Tom gave a small nod, his eyes scanning her face as if hoping to catch a glimpse of something that would make everything fall into place. But before he could say anything more, they heard a voice calling from the hallway. "Tom!" Vivian's voice rang out, her tone smooth yet pointed. He sighed, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face, but he quickly composed himself as Vivian appeared in the doorway, her gaze instantly landing on Lily with thinly veiled suspicion. She wore a tight smile, but her eyes were hard, as if she could sense that something unspoken had passed between them. "Darling, I was looking for you," Vivian said, moving to his side with a proprietary air, slipping her hand around his arm. She turned her gaze to Lily, her expression a mixture of politeness and disdain. "I'm sure you have plenty of work to do, Lily." "Yes, ma'am," Lily replied, forcing herself to keep her face neutral as she gathered her things and left the room, feeling the weight of Vivian's eyes on her back. The encounter left her both hopeful and frustrated. Tom was on the verge of remembering, but Vivian's presence seemed to keep him tethered, preventing him from reaching out fully to the truth. As she continued her tasks throughout the day, Lily tried to keep her distance, aware that any further interaction with Tom would only deepen Vivian's suspicion. Yet her mind couldn't shake the thought of him, his eyes searching hers, the softness in his expression that hinted at something just beneath the surface. She clung to the hope that, given time, the memories would come back, even if only in pieces. That afternoon, as she was organizing linens in the storage room, Maria, the cook, appeared, a friendly smile on her face. "Are you settling in all right, Lily?" Maria asked, her tone warm and kind. Lily nodded, grateful for Maria's presence. "Yes, thank you. It's a lot to take in, but I'm managing." Maria leaned closer, her expression turning more serious. "I've noticed how Mrs. Westwood's been watching you. She can be intense, especially when it comes to Mr. Grant." Lily hesitated, wondering how much she could confide in Maria. She decided to take a small risk. "I think Mr. Grant might be starting to remember things. It's almost like he recognizes me, even if he doesn't understand why." Maria's eyes widened slightly and she nodded knowingly. "It wouldn't surprise me sometimes. Memories find their way back, no matter how hard people try to bury them." Lily studied Maria's face, sensing that the older woman knew more than she was letting on. Do you think Mrs. Westwood would try to stop him from remembering? Maria sighed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I've been here a long time, Lily. I've seen how she operates. She's very protective of Mr. Grant, but it's more than that. She has control over him, control that she won't let go of easily. Lily's stomach twisted at Maria's words, but she wasn't surprised. She'd sensed Vivian's possessiveness, the way she hovered over Tom, keeping him close, as if afraid that one wrong move would shatter the illusion she'd carefully constructed. Thank you, Maria, Lily said softly, her mind racing. Vivian's influence over Tom was stronger than she'd realized. If she wanted to help him remember, she would need to be cautious. Vivian wasn't just suspicious. She was actively working to keep Tom in the dark. As the day drew to a close, Lily found herself alone in the hallway. About to leave for the evening, she glanced over her shoulder, hoping for one last glimpse of Tom, when she heard his voice. "Lily!" he called out, and she turned to see him standing just a few steps away, his expression almost hesitant. He glanced around, as if wary of being seen, then stepped closer. "I just wanted to thank you for talking to me today. It helped." Lily felt a surge of emotion, her heart swelling with hope. "I'm glad, sometimes, talking can be the first step to remembering." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment longer than necessary. "I feel like there's so much I don't understand, but when I'm around you, it feels familiar, like I'm close to something I can't quite reach." Lily swallowed, her throat tight. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between them, but she held herself back, knowing that their every move could be watched. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from down the hall. They both turned to see Vivian approaching, her expression unreadable as she looked between them. "Tom," she said smoothly, "I thought we were going to discuss the charity gala tonight." Tom glanced at Lily, a flicker of regret in his eyes, before nodding to Vivian. "Yes, of course." As he walked away with Vivian, Lily's heart ached with longing and frustration. She could feel him slipping further away, but she wasn't about to give up. Not yet. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she had come too far to turn back now. The next few days in the mansion passed in a blur of chores and stolen glances. Lily continued her work as unobtrusively as possible, but each encounter with Tom left her both hopeful and frustrated. He was starting to sense a connection between them, but Vivian's presence, her unyielding gaze and unspoken threats, kept Lily cautious. She knew she couldn't confront him directly, not with Vivian lurking around every corner. However, as the days went by, Tom's curiosity only seemed to grow. He would find ways to cross her path, small moments in passing, brief conversations that hinted at something deeper. Every time, there was a flicker in his eyes, as though he were on the edge of a memory that refused to fully surface. Then, one evening, as Lily was finishing up in the kitchen, Maria pulled her aside, her expression conspiratorial. "Mr. Grant asked me to pass a message to you," Maria whispered, glancing over her shoulder to ensure no one was listening. "He wants to speak with you privately. He said he'll be in the greenhouse after dinner." Lily's heart raced, and she felt a thrill of hope mixed with apprehension. "Did he say why?" Maria shook her head. "No, but I think he's beginning to question things. Be careful, Lily. Mrs. Westwood doesn't miss much." Lily nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. She would have to be cautious, but this was the chance she'd been waiting for. If Tom was reaching out to her, perhaps he was ready to hear the truth. That evening, after the rest of the household had settled into their routines, Lily made her way to the greenhouse. The glass structure stood at the far end of the garden, hidden from the main view of the mansion. The path was dimly lit, the shadows of the trees casting long, eerie shapes across the grass. She felt her nerves tighten as she approached, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one had followed her. Inside, the greenhouse was warm and humid, filled with the scents of soil and blooming flowers. She spotted Tom near a cluster of orchids, his back to her, his posture tense. At the sound of her footsteps, he turned, his expression a mix of relief and hesitation. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Lily replied, moving closer, her heart pounding. She took in his face, the familiar contours that had once been so dear to her, now etched with confusion and uncertainty. Why did you want to meet? Tom hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. There's something I feel like I should remember. It's been haunting me, ever since you arrived. He looked up, his eyes searching hers. I don't know why, but when I'm around you, there's this feeling, like a memory just out of reach. It doesn't make sense, but I can't shake it. Lily's breath caught, her throat tightening as she realized that he was so close to remembering. Tom, she began, her voice soft but steady. There are things about your past that you don't know. Things that someone has kept from you. He stared at her, confusion giving way to something darker, a shadow of realization. You mean Vivian? Lily took a deep breath, nodding. She's kept things from you, things that you deserve to know. And one of those things is me. She struggled to keep her voice steady, her emotions swirling as she prepared to reveal the truth. We knew each other, Tom. Before your accident, we were close. Tom's expression shifted, a flash of recognition followed by doubt. I don't understand. Why would she hide that from me? Because she wanted to keep you to herself, Lily replied, her voice barely a whisper. She's afraid of you remembering. She's afraid of what you might discover about your life before her. For a moment, Tom said nothing, his gaze dropping as he processed her words. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the way he fought to piece together the fragments of his past. Finally, he looked up, his voice a mixture of anger and hurt. How much has she hidden from me? Lily hesitated, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. Everything. She's kept you in the dark about us, and there's someone else too. Someone important. Tom's brow furrowed, and she could see the desperation in his eyes as he grappled with the enormity of her words. Who? Lily swallowed, her heart aching as she prepared to say the words she had been holding back for so long. Your daughter, Tom. You have a daughter. His face went pale, his eyes widening in shock. He staggered back, as though the truth had physically struck him. A daughter, he stammered, his voice barely audible. How could she keep that from me? She did it to control you, to keep you close, Lily explained, feeling a rush of anger as she thought of all the years lost, all the lies that had kept them apart. I don't know what her reasons were, but she made sure you never knew about us. About your family. Tom ran a hand through his hair, his expression twisted with pain and disbelief. I can't believe this. All this time, I thought I had no past. No one. But you. You and our daughter. Lily stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his arm. You're not alone, Tom. You have a family. People who love you. All you have to do is remember. He looked down at her hand, his expression softening as he took her fingers in his own, his grip firm yet trembling. I want to remember. I want to know everything about you. About our daughter. He swallowed, his voice thick with emotion. But how do I even begin? How do I face her? Face all these lost years? Before Lily could answer, a rustling sound came from behind them, and they both turned, their hearts pounding. The silhouette of a figure stood in the shadows just outside the greenhouse door, watching. Lily's blood ran cold as she recognized the rigid posture, the glint of fury in the eyes. Vivian. Vivian stepped into the greenhouse, her expression twisted with rage and disbelief. Her gaze flickered between them, her lips curling into a bitter smile. So this is why you've been sneaking around, she said, her voice sharp and accusatory. I should have known you'd try something like this. Lily? Tom stepped forward, his expression darkening as he faced Vivian. Why didn't you tell me, Vivian? He demanded, his voice filled with hurt and anger. Why didn't you tell me I had a daughter, that I had a life before you? Vivian's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice dripping with venom. Because you don't need them. I saved you from a life of mediocrity, from people who were only going to drag you down. I gave you a fresh start, a better life. A better life built on lies, Tom shot back, his voice shaking with fury. You had no right to take that from me. Vivian's gaze hardened, and she looked at Lily with unmasked contempt. And you think you can just walk back into his life and destroy everything we've built together? Lily's voice was steady as she replied, I'm not here to destroy anything, Vivian. I'm here to tell him the truth you kept from him. Vivian's face twisted with rage. And for a moment, Lily thought she might lash out. But then Vivian's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing with a calculating gleam. "Fine," Vivian said, her tone icy. "If you want the truth so badly, Tom, then you can have it. But don't think for a second that I'll let you go that easily." She turned on her heel, storming out of the greenhouse, leaving them both shaken in the wake of her fury. As the door slammed shut, Tom turned to Lily, his face etched with determination. "I need to know everything, Lily. I don't care what it takes. I need to know who I was, who I am." Lily nodded, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Then we'll face this together. No more lies, no more secrets, I promise." And as they left the greenhouse side by side, Lily knew that the battle for the truth had only just begun. The next day, a thick tension filled the mansion. Lily felt it the moment she walked in. The air was charged, heavy with an unspoken threat. She could sense Vivian's fury lurking behind every corner, and every sound seemed amplified, every movement suspicious. Yet, as much as Vivian's presence unsettled her, Lily couldn't afford to be deterred now. She had shared the truth with Tom, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of her secrets lift. Replaced by a renewed purpose, as she went about her morning duties, she noticed Tom standing alone by a window, his gaze distant, his posture tense. She could see the turmoil in his expression, the way his mind seemed to race with the pieces of his fractured past. He looked up as she approached, his face softening, but there was a sadness there too, a weariness that went beyond his lost memories. Before she could say anything, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. Vivian appeared, her expression a controlled mask of composure, though her eyes held a fierce glint that made Lily's skin prickle. She moved past Lily with barely a glance, positioning herself next to Tom as if staking a claim. "Tom," she began, her tone smooth but strained, "I think we need to discuss what happened last night." Tom's jaw tightened, and he nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on Vivian. "Yes, I think we do." Vivian's eyes flickered toward Lily, a warning clear in her gaze. "Privately," she added pointedly. Lily took a step back, but Tom placed a gentle hand on her arm, stopping her. "No, Vivian. She deserves to be here. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of both of us." Vivian's smile faltered, and a flash of frustration crossed her face. Though she quickly masked it, she took a deep breath, her expression settling into a look of pity, as though she were the only one with clarity in a world that had lost its bearings. "Tom, I understand that you're confused, that you're searching for answers," she said, her voice laced with sympathy. "But you need to understand, Lily's been holding on to something that isn't real. You don't remember her for a reason." Lily felt a pang of anger, but she remained silent, waiting for Tom's reaction. He took a step back, folding his arms, his gaze unwavering as he watched Vivian. "Why don't you stop twisting this?" "Vivian," he said, his voice steady but cold. "Tell me the real reason you kept my past hidden from me. Why didn't you tell me I had a family?" Vivian's face tightened, her composure slipping just slightly. "I kept it from you because I wanted to protect you," she replied, her voice shaking with barely contained frustration. "You were vulnerable, Tom. Lost. You didn't need to be burdened by a life you'd already left behind. I thought I was giving you a chance to start over. Start over. You stole my life from me," Tom replied, his voice breaking as the weight of her betrayal sank in. "You kept me from my own daughter. Do you have any idea what that means?" Vivian's expression hardened, her sympathy replaced by a cold resolve. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. "Do you really think you would have been happier if you'd stayed in that past? Do you know where she came from, Tom? What kind of life she had?" Lily's hands clenched, a surge of anger rising in her. She could feel the insult lurking behind Vivian's words, the contempt she held for Lily's humble background. But she refused to let Vivian intimidate her. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to let this woman belittle her or her daughter. "Tom deserves to make his own choices," Lily said, her voice steady. "You don't get to decide what parts of his life he should remember." Vivian's gaze snapped to Lily, her eyes narrowing with a cold fury. "And you think you're the answer to everything, don't you? That just because you had some brief romance years ago, You deserve to walk back into his life and disrupt everything. This isn't about me, Lily replied, meeting Vivian's gaze with quiet defiance. It's about the truth. It's about Tom having the right to know who he is, to know his own daughter. Vivian's lips tightened, and for a moment her mask slipped, revealing the bitterness beneath. She looked at Tom, her eyes pleading, as if she could still sway him with her words. "I've been there for you, Tom," she said, her voice softening, a desperate edge creeping into her tone. "I've given you everything, a life of stability, of luxury, and you're willing to throw it all away for a memory." Tom's face was set in stone, his eyes steely. "It's not just a memory. Vivian, it's my life, my family." The words hung heavy in the air, and Vivian's face twisted with a mixture of anger and despair. She took a step back, her fists clenched at her sides as she tried to regain her composure. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You want the truth? Here it is. I've always known about your daughter, about the life you left behind, and yes, I did everything I could to keep you from it, because I knew the kind of life Lily would offer you, a life of mediocrity, of struggle. I was protecting you." The admission sent a shockwave through the room. Tom stared at her, disbelief mingling with a profound sense of betrayal. "You didn't protect me, Vivian," he said, his voice low and filled with hurt. "You kept me in a prison of your own making. You robbed me of my past, my family, everything that mattered." Vivian's face paled, and for a moment, her resolve wavered, but then her gaze hardened, and she lifted her chin defiantly. "Maybe so, but you can't change the past, Tom. You've been with me for years now. This connection you feel with her, it's just a memory. You don't even know who you were before the accident." "Then maybe it's time I found out," he replied, his voice steady. "With or without your approval." Vivian's eyes narrowed, and a chilling smile touched her lips. "Do you really think it's that simple? Do you think you can just walk away from all of this?" She gestured around the grand mansion, her voice cold and measured. "I've built this life, this home, and I won't let you or anyone else tear it apart." She turned on her heel, storming out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive, as though a storm had just passed, leaving destruction in its wake. Tom turned to Lily, his face filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice raw, "for everything she put you through, for all the years I lost, with you and with our daughter." Lily felt her heart soften, her own pain momentarily eclipsed by the sorrow in his eyes. "It wasn't your fault, Tom. None of this was." He took a step closer, reaching out to gently take her hands in his. "I don't know how to make up for lost time, but I want to try. I want to know my daughter, to know you again." Lily's heart swelled, and she gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Then let's take it one step at a time." Together, they stood in silence, each lost in their thoughts, but for the first time, there was a sense of unity between them, a shared determination to reclaim what had been taken from them. But as they left the room, side by side, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that Vivian's fury was far from over. The woman had revealed her true intentions, but Lily sensed there was more beneath the surface, a desperation that could drive her to do anything to keep Tom within her grasp. And as they walked down the hallway, the shadow of Vivian's last words lingered in Lily's mind, a reminder that the fight for the truth was far from over. The following day, an intense resolve filled Lily. With Tom now aware of the truth, she knew it was only a matter of time before Vivian made her next move. Her bitterness was far from subdued, and Lily feared just how far Vivian would go to maintain her control, but she couldn't dwell on that. Today, she was determined to dig deeper, to uncover every detail of Tom's past that had been erased. After breakfast, she quietly slipped into the small office tucked away on the mansion's first floor, where the family records and documents were stored. The room was used sparingly and rarely cleaned by the staff, making it the perfect place to search without drawing unwanted attention. She carefully opened drawers, sorting through files and envelopes, hoping to find something, anything, that would shed light on Vivian's manipulation and Tom's missing years. As she combed through the paperwork, she found mundane household records, property titles, and financial documents. But then, Buried at the back of one drawer, she discovered a file labeled with Tom's full name and a date, the day of his accident. Lily's heart pounded as she flipped it open, her eyes scanning the papers quickly. The file contained details from the hospital report, the notes on Tom's amnesia, and recommendations from several specialists who had advised Vivian on his care. But what struck Lily was a small note attached to one of the reports, handwritten and barely legible, stating, "No mention of prior relationships. Keep all external influences minimal." Her breath caught. This was the confirmation she needed, proof that Vivian had orchestrated Tom's isolation, suppressing any mention of his previous life, even going as far as advising the medical team to limit outside contact. Vivian had controlled every aspect of Tom's recovery, crafting a life where she was the only figure he could depend on. As Lily continued reading, her anger grew. She had suspected Vivian's interference, but seeing the proof laid out so blatantly left her furious. It wasn't just that Vivian had manipulated Tom. She had stolen his entire life, keeping him locked in a world of fabricated security. A sudden creak of the door snapped Lily from her thoughts. She quickly stuffed the papers back into the drawer and spun around to see Maria standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with worry. "Lily," Maria whispered, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "What are you doing in here?" Lily bit her lip, hesitating. She trusted Maria, but with Vivian's suspicions already heightened, she wasn't sure how much she should reveal. "I'm looking for answers." "Maria," Lily admitted, keeping her voice low, "I found documents. Proof that Vivian controlled everything about Tom's recovery. She's been hiding his past intentionally." Maria's eyes softened, and she nodded, as if she had suspected as much all along. "I've known for years that Mrs. Westwood was possessive, especially when it came to Mr. Grant. But I didn't realize it went this far." Lily looked down, feeling a swell of gratitude for Maria's understanding. "I just want him to know the truth. He deserves that." Maria placed a comforting hand on Lily's shoulder. "If you need help, you can count on me. Mrs. Westwood has kept this place in a grip of fear for too long." Lily smiled, the weight of the past days lifting slightly. Having an ally, someone who understood the gravity of the situation, gave her strength. She thanked Maria and tucked the file away, committing its details to memory. It was time to speak to Tom, to share what she had discovered. That afternoon, Lily found Tom in the garden, sitting alone on a bench beneath a towering oak tree. He seemed lost in thought, his eyes distant as he gazed at the flowers around him. She approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the grass, and he looked up, his expression brightening at the sight of her. "Lily," he said, his voice warm but tinged with sadness, "I've been thinking about everything. I feel like I barely know who I am anymore." She took a seat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his. "I've been doing some digging," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Vivian, she made sure that you wouldn't remember your past. She controlled everything. Your recovery, your contact with the outside world, it's all here." She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small piece of paper with the handwritten note she'd copied from the file. Tom took the paper, his brows furrowing as he read it. A mixture of anger and hurt clouded his expression, and he clenched the paper in his fist. She did this, kept me from my own life." Lily nodded, her heart aching for him. "She didn't just hide the truth. She erased it, Tom. She wanted to keep you in her world, dependent on her. She's been keeping you away from your family, from your daughter." The mention of his daughter made Tom's face soften, and he looked down, his voice choked with emotion. "I missed everything. Her first steps, her first words. I didn't even know she existed." Lily reached for his hand, her own eyes filling with tears. "You didn't miss everything, Tom. She's still here. She's an incredible girl, so bright and loving. She deserves to know you, and you deserve to be a part of her life." Tom closed his eyes, breathing deeply, as if trying to absorb the weight of her words. "I want that more than anything. But what about Vivian? She won't let this go." Lily hesitated, knowing he was right. Vivian was too deeply entwined in Tom's life to simply step aside. But she couldn't let fear hold them back now. "We'll face her together," Lily said firmly. "She's controlled you long enough. She has no right to keep you from your family." Tom nodded slowly, his expression hardening with resolve. "You're right. I've let her dictate my life for too long. It's time I take it back." They sat in silence, a newfound determination settling between them. The past was painful, but the future was within their reach. Tom was no longer alone, and with Lily by his side, he was ready to reclaim the life that had been stolen from him. As they rose from the bench, a rustling sound caught their attention. Both turned to see Vivian standing a few feet away, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. "How dare you!" Vivian hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "How dare you poison his mind with lies?" Tom took a step forward, his expression unyielding. "They aren't lies, Vivian. I know what you did. You kept my past from me, kept my daughter from me. You built this life on manipulation and deceit." Vivian's face twisted, her composure slipping. "Everything I did was for you, Tom. I gave you a life you never would have had otherwise. You think she would have given you anything better? She barely had enough to care for herself, let alone a family. That wasn't your choice to make," Tom replied, his voice steady. "You took away my family, my memories, and tried to replace them with your own version of the truth." Vivian's eyes burned with resentment, and she took a step back, shaking her head. "You're making a mistake, Tom. You don't know what you're giving up." "I know exactly what I'm giving up," he replied, his voice filled with conviction. "A life built on lies is no life at all." Vivian's gaze turned cold, and for a moment, her mask slipped, revealing the desperation and fury beneath. "If you leave, Tom, you'll regret it. You'll regret every single thing you're giving up." But Tom didn't falter. With a final glance at Lily, he took her hand, turning away from Vivian and leading her toward the mansion. As they walked, Lily felt a surge of relief and hope, but she knew this wasn't the end. Vivian's bitterness had turned to something darker, something dangerous. As they stepped back into the house, hand in hand, Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know what Vivian was capable of, but one thing was certain: the battle was far from over. The days that followed were tense, and every interaction in the mansion felt like walking on eggshells. Vivian's presence was a constant shadow, and her fury had only intensified since Tom's confrontation in the garden. Though she maintained a mask of composure around the other staff, her glares and cold remarks made it clear to Lily that the battle was far from over. But Lily and Tom remained resolute. Tom had begun to piece together his past, and with every conversation, he grew more certain of his feelings for Lily and his determination to reclaim his lost life. For the first time, they spoke freely of their shared memories, of their time together before the accident, and most importantly, of their daughter, Maya. Each new revelation brought Tom closer to the man he once was. One evening, Tom and Lily decided it was time to confront Vivian fully, to demand an end to her manipulation. They arranged to meet her in the grand study, a place she seldom used, but where they could speak privately. As the clock struck 8, they waited, feeling a mixture of apprehension and determination. Vivian arrived moments later, her expression icy as she stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. She regarded them both with a look of disdain, her posture rigid, as if bracing herself for an attack. "So," Vivian began, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "is this an ambush? Or am I simply here to watch you two play out this fantasy you've concocted?" Tom took a steadying breath, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't a fantasy, Vivian. This is my life. The life you stole from me. You kept me in the dark, isolated me from everything and everyone I knew, just to create your own version of reality." Vivian's eyes narrowed, her lips curling in a bitter smile. "Stole from you. I saved you, Tom. You were broken, lost, with nothing to your name but scraps of a past that offered you nothing but pain. I gave you everything: stability, wealth, a home. And what did that cost me?" he retorted, his voice laced with pain. "My memories, my family, my daughter. You didn't save me, Vivian. You caged me." Vivian's gaze flicked to Lily, her face hardening. "And you think she would have given you anything better? This girl who barely made ends meet. She had nothing to offer you." Lily, who had been silent until now, took a step forward, her voice calm but firm. "What I had to offer was honesty, love, and a family that would never abandon each other." "That's more than you could ever understand, Vivian," Vivian scoffed, but a flicker of desperation passed over her face. You have no idea what he went through after the accident. The doctors said he might never recover, that he might be vulnerable to manipulation. So I did what I had to do. I protected him from people like you, who would only bring chaos into his life. People like me, Lily repeated, her anger rising. I was his family, Vivian. I had his child, and you kept us from him. You weren't protecting him. You were protecting yourself. Vivian's mask slipped, and for the first time, she looked vulnerable. Her eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and pain. She took a breath, as if gathering her strength, and her tone softened slightly, almost pleading. Tom, don't you see? She said, her voice shaking. You are everything to me. I gave up so much to be with you, to take care of you when you were at your lowest. I can't just let you walk away. Tom's expression softened, but his resolve remained unshaken. Vivian, I'm grateful for everything you did, but gratitude doesn't erase the truth. You took choices away from me, choices I had the right to make. And now, I'm choosing to live my life with the people who matter to me, with my daughter. Vivian's face twisted with anger, and she looked at Lily, her voice trembling with accusation. This is your fault. You're the one who turned him against me. You couldn't leave well enough alone. Lily met Vivian's gaze, her voice steady. You were the one who turned him against yourself, Vivian. Your lies and manipulation were bound to fall apart sooner or later. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, charged with tension. Then, as if unable to contain her rage, Vivian's composure shattered. Her voice rose, shaking with fury and desperation. I won't let you ruin everything, she screamed, her eyes blazing. You think you can just waltz in here and take him away? I fought too hard, given too much. Tom's voice was quiet but firm. This isn't a fight, Vivian. It's the truth, and I'm done living a lie. Vivian's shoulders slumped, and she looked away, her face pale, as if the weight of her actions had finally hit her. Fine, she muttered, her voice hollow. If that's what you want, then leave. Take your so-called family and go. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallways, each step a reminder of the crumbling foundation of her fabricated world. When the door shut behind her, Tom exhaled deeply, the tension melting from his face. He turned to Lily, his eyes filled with relief and gratitude. It's over, he whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it real. Lily placed a comforting hand on his arm, a smile of quiet reassurance on her face. You have your life back, Tom. The truth is finally out. They stood together in silence, each absorbing the weight of what had just transpired. The battle had been long and painful, but they had emerged on the other side, ready to rebuild, to finally embrace the family they had fought so hard to protect. But as they left the study, an uneasy feeling lingered in the back of Lily's mind. She knew Vivian too well to believe she would simply walk away without a final attempt to reclaim her control, and the fear of what she might do next cast a long shadow over their newfound freedom. Later that night, Lily sat by Mia's bedside, watching her daughter's peaceful face as she slept. It was a quiet moment, one she cherished after so many turbulent days. Yet, as she looked at Mia, she felt a shiver of dread creep over her, a premonition that the peace they had fought so hard for was fragile, vulnerable to Vivian's lingering wrath. Tom joined her in the doorway, his expression soft as he looked from Mia to Lily. She's beautiful, he whispered, his voice filled with awe and love. Lily smiled, taking his hand as he sat beside her. She's been waiting for you, Tom. Every day, she's asked about her father. Tom's face tightened with emotion, and he reached down to gently stroke Mia's hair. I won't let her down. Lily, I promise you that. As they held hands, watching over their sleeping daughter, they felt a sense of calm, a respite from the chaos that had ruled their lives for so long. But in the back of Lily's mind, a lingering doubt gnawed at her. Vivian was many things, but she was not a woman who accepted defeat easily. And as the clock struck midnight, a feeling of foreboding settled over the house. The battle for the truth had been won, but the war for their future was just beginning. The following morning dawned gray and heavy, casting a somber light across the mansion. Lily and Tom shared a quiet breakfast with Mia, relishing the simple peace of a family reunited. But beneath the warmth of their togetherness, A shared sense of tension lingered. Lily knew that Vivian's silence could only mean one thing. She was planning something. The quiet was only the calm before the storm. Later that morning, Tom received a message from Vivian, instructing him to meet her in the grand ballroom. He read the note with a mixture of apprehension and exhaustion, knowing that their final confrontation was at hand. He looked at Lily, who gave him a reassuring nod, her eyes filled with support and determination. "I'll be with you," she said softly, her hand gently squeezing his. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Together, they made their way to the ballroom, the vast, empty space feeling colder and more imposing than ever. Vivian was already there, standing near the center of the room with a posture as rigid as stone, her arms crossed, her gaze intense and unyielding. She watched them approach, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of Lily by Tom's side. A bitter smile twisted her lips. "So," she began, her voice cold and laced with venom, "this is how it ends. After everything I've done for you, Tom. After everything I sacrificed." Tom held her gaze, his face calm yet resolute. "What you did, Vivian, was for yourself. You didn't sacrifice anything for me. You manipulated, you lied, and you stole my life." Vivian's jaw clenched, and for a moment, her eyes glistened with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "You don't understand, Tom. I loved you. I saved you from a life of mediocrity, a life that would have only held you back. Without me, you would have been nothing." Lily took a step forward, her voice steady and unafraid. "Tom's life was never yours to control, Vivian. No matter how much you try to twist the truth, what you did was cruel and selfish." Vivian's gaze snapped to Lily, her face contorting with fury. "And who are you to judge me? You're nothing, just a girl from nowhere, clinging to a fantasy of a life you think you deserve. You think love will give you everything, but it won't. Tom only has what he has because of me." Tom shook his head, his expression a mixture of sorrow and disappointment. "I was never yours to own, Vivian. Love doesn't work that way. What I had with Lily was real, and you took that from me." Vivian's face twisted, her calm facade finally cracking. She looked between them, her expression wild with desperation. "So, what's the plan then? You just walk away with her. Pretend the last few years never happened." Tom took a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with pain. "I don't expect you to understand, but yes, I want my life back, Vivian. I want to be with my daughter, to have a family, a real family." Vivian's eyes filled with rage and she clenched her fists, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You think you can just leave me? That easily? I won't let you go that easily, Tom. I've built my life around you, and if you think I'm going to stand by and watch you walk away, you're gravely mistaken." Lily felt a shiver of unease as Vivian's words hung in the air, an unspoken threat laced within them. She stepped closer to Tom, her hand reaching for his. "Vivian," Lily said, her voice gentle but firm, "this is over. You can't hold him hostage anymore. Let him go. Let us all go." Vivian's gaze turned cold, and a bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Let you go? You think this is a choice? I've invested everything in this life, in him. I won't just let you take it from me." Her words seemed to echo through the room, filling the air with a sense of finality. Then, as if realizing the futility of her rage, her shoulders slumped, and a hollow look filled her eyes. "Fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Go, take him. Take everything. But don't think for a moment that you'll ever truly escape me. I'll be there, in every shadow, every doubt, every fear that haunts you. You'll never be free of what I've done." Lily felt a chill run down her spine, but she met Vivian's gaze with calm defiance. "We'll move forward, no matter what you try to hold over us. We're free, Vivian, and there's nothing you can do to change that." For a long moment, Vivian stared at them, her expression a twisted mixture of anger and grief. Then, with a final resigned sigh, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. She paused at the door, glancing back with a look of bitter finality. "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "But remember, Tom, I was there when you were broken, when you were nothing, and when it all falls apart. You'll realize just how wrong you were to turn your back on me." Without another word, she turned and left, the door closing behind her with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through the vast emptiness of the ballroom. Tom let out a long, shaky breath, and Lily squeezed his hand, offering silent reassurance. The confrontation had left them both shaken, but there was a sense of relief, too, a release from the grip of Vivian's control. They stood there in silence, letting the moment sink in, until Tom finally spoke, his voice soft, but filled with emotion. "It's over, Lily. Really over." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with hope. "Yes, it is. And now, we can finally move on. We can be a family." They left the ballroom hand in hand, the weight of the past slowly lifting from their shoulders as they made their way toward Mia's room. When they reached her, they found her playing quietly, a look of pure joy lighting up her face when she saw them together. Tom knelt beside Maya, his voice filled with warmth and love. "Mia, there's so much I want to know about you, and from now on, I promise, I'll be here every day." Mia threw her arms around him, her laughter filling the room with a sense of peace and joy that had long been missing from their lives. Lily watched, her heart full, as Tom held their daughter, a look of contentment settling over him. That night, as they sat together, Lily felt a deep sense of calm for the first time in years. They had weathered the storm, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they were finally free to build the life they'd once dreamed of, a life filled with love, honesty, and a family united. But even as they celebrated this new beginning, a quiet understanding remained in the back of Lily's mind. She knew Vivian's bitterness wouldn't fade easily, that her words would linger as a reminder of the length she'd gone to keep Tom within her grasp. But Lily also knew that they were stronger now, bound by the truth and a love that had survived years of pain and separation. And as they looked toward the future, they felt a shared resolve. No matter what shadows Vivian might try to cast, they would face them together, united by a love that would withstand anything. Leaving the mansion was like shedding an old skin for Tom. Lily and Maya, a heavy burden finally lifted. They had decided to move to a modest, charming cottage just outside of town, nestled among rolling hills and shaded by trees that stretched out as far as the eye could see. It was a home filled with warmth, with sunlight spilling through the windows and laughter echoing through every room. Here they felt like a true family, free from the shadows that had once bound them. The simplicity of their new life was a welcome relief. Each day was a reminder of how far they'd come, Tom and Mia building the bond they'd missed for so long, and Lily watching with a quiet joy as they shared their lives. The father and daughter finally united. She would often catch Tom glancing at Maya with a mix of awe and regret, his heartache clear as he came to know the child he'd never known existed. But each hug, each shared laugh, seemed to heal him a little more. One afternoon, Lily found Tom sitting on the back porch, lost in thought as he looked out over the garden where Maya was chasing butterflies. She joined him, slipping her hand into his, sensing the gratitude in his gaze as he looked up at her. "You brought me back to life, Lily," he said, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "Every time I see her, every laugh and every little thing she does, it reminds me of everything I could have lost forever. But you didn't give up. Even after all this time, you fought for us." Lily smiled, leaning into him. "I fought because you're worth it, Tom. Because she deserves to know her father. We deserve this life, free from lies, from pain, and now we finally have it." They sat together, watching Mia as she collected flowers, her laughter ringing through the air. For the first time in years, the future felt bright, unshadowed by Vivian's presence. They had built a sanctuary, a life of peace and honesty, and Tom cherished every moment of it. That night, they shared a quiet family dinner, Mia eagerly telling stories of her new friends at school, her excitement infectious as she recounted every detail. Tom and Lily listened, smiling, each word a small victory, a reminder of the family they had reclaimed. As Mia's eyes grew heavy, they tucked her into bed. Lingering by her side as she drifted off to sleep, Tom and Lily returned to the porch, a gentle autumn breeze rustling the leaves. They sat close, wrapped in the warmth of their togetherness, and Tom looked at Lily with a tenderness that made her heart swell. "She's amazing," he whispered, "so strong and bright, just like her mother." Lily laughed softly, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "I think she gets a lot of it from you too." For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts of the life they were building, the love that had withstood so many obstacles. But as the evening wore on, a quiet unease crept into Lily's mind. Vivian's absence in their lives had been almost too quiet, and though they had left the mansion behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that Vivian's influence hadn't disappeared completely. Tom seemed to sense her tension, his hand giving hers a reassuring squeeze. "Vivian won't control us anymore, Lily. Whatever she does, we'll face it together. She's lost her hold on us." Lily nodded, though her heart held a flicker of doubt. She knew Vivian was not a woman to accept defeat easily, but for now, she was content to let that worry fade, to focus on the family she had fought so hard to rebuild. As they sat together under the night sky, a calmness settled over them. This was their life now, a life of freedom, of love, of quiet strength. They had walked through fire and come out stronger, bound by the truth and by the future they were determined to protect. And as the stars emerged above, Lily knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as they always had. Together, the peaceful days stretched into weeks, and each one brought Tom, Lily, and Mia closer as a family. They embraced the rhythms of their new life, cherishing the quiet routines and small joys that now defined their days. Tom and Maya grew inseparable, sharing inside jokes and silly games, filling the cottage with the kind of warmth and love Lily had dreamed of for so long. One crisp autumn morning, as Tom gathered mail from the small wooden box at the end of their driveway, he noticed an envelope with no return address. His stomach twisted, an unsettling feeling creeping over him as he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, bearing just a few words in elegant, familiar handwriting. "You may have left, but this isn't over. I'll be watching." Vivian's handwriting was unmistakable, each word dripping with bitterness and veiled threat. Tom felt a flash of anger, his fingers tightening around the paper. After everything they had been through, Vivian was still trying to maintain her grip on his life, refusing to let go even now. He took a deep breath, gathering his resolve, and walked back to the house, the letter held tightly in his hand. When he entered the kitchen, Lily looked up from where she was preparing breakfast, immediately sensing the tension in his expression. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. Wordlessly, Tom handed her the letter, watching as her face fell while she read Vivian's chilling message. She took a moment, letting out a sigh as she folded the letter and set it down on the counter. "I knew she wouldn't give up that easily," Lily murmured, a mix of sadness and frustration in her voice. "Vivian's never been one to let go without a fight." Tom nodded, the anger in him simmering down to a quiet resolve. "But we can't let her control us anymore, Lily. She can't dictate how we live our lives. She might watch, she might threaten, but she doesn't have any real power over us now." Lily met his gaze, her expression softening. "You're right. We've come too far to let her poison our happiness. This is our life, Tom, and no one, not even Vivian, can take that from us." They shared a quiet, determined look, each silently agreeing that they would not let Vivian's bitterness cast a shadow over the future they had fought so hard to build. Later that afternoon, Tom took Mia to the local park. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet as they walked, Mia's laughter echoing through the air as she ran ahead, collecting bright red and golden leaves. Tom watched her, his heart swelling with gratitude and love, a renewed sense of purpose grounding him. This was his family, his life, and nothing would stand in the way of their happiness. As they sat on a park bench, Mia leaned into him, holding up a perfect red leaf with a proud grin. "Look, Daddy, isn't it pretty?" Tom smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "It's beautiful, Mia, just like you." They stayed at the park until the sun began to dip below the trees, casting a warm golden glow over everything. Tom's worries faded in the face of Mia's happiness, her innocence a reminder of all the goodness and purity that he wanted to protect. Vivian's threat seemed small, insignificant, compared to the love and joy that filled his heart now. When they returned home, Lily met them at the door, her face lighting up as she saw them together. She knelt to hug Mia, who proudly showed her the leaves she had collected, her small hands holding them up like precious treasures. Tom watched them, a deep peace settling over him, the uncertainty, the pain, the secrets, None of it mattered anymore. They had made it through, and together, they were stronger than anything that might come their way. That night, as they tucked Maya into bed, Tom and Lily shared a quiet moment together, reflecting on the journey they had taken, the battles they had won. Lily reached for his hand, her fingers entwining with his as they stood by their daughter's bedside, watching her drift into a peaceful sleep. "She'll never know how much we went through to get here," Tom whispered, a smile touching his lips. "But maybe that's a good thing." Lily nodded, her own smile soft. "We did it for her, for us, and for the life we have now." They left Mia's room, moving to the porch where they sat in the cool night air, the stars glittering above. Tom pulled Lily close, his arm wrapped around her shoulders as they gazed out at the world that now belonged to them. Whatever lingering threats Vivian might make, whatever attempts she might have left to disrupt their happiness, they knew one thing with certainty: their family was unbreakable, bound by love, truth, and a strength forged in hardship. They were finally free, and as the night deepened, they held each other close, ready to face the future together, no matter what it might hold.